That's what I'm talking about.
Wait! Okay, now, from the beginning.
Hit it, boys.
Welcome to the Modern Campus Project, the Higher Ed PM, a brand new 4-part pulse check series from Enrollify. I'm Jake Tolman, the CEO of Mainform Consulting, a seasoned project management consultant with over a decade of experience specializing in technology system integrations, digital transformation, and project leadership within the higher education sector. In this series, we'll do 3 things. Set the foundation of what modern project management looks like with AI, campus-ready language that gets presidents, provosts, and frontline staff moving in sync, and step-by-step plans to build your AI PM skills without the migraines. Now, let's get into today's episode. We all know that the real work of a project doesn't happen at kickoff. It happens in the messy middle, where processes break down, people forget the SOP, and the follow-through can get fuzzy. But what if AI could actually help us not just write better processes, but keep them alive? So this episode today is going to be for those who are in the weeds of a project, in the implementation, who are close to the processes, who are getting things done, where the rubber meets the road. How do we look at these processes that we're supposed to be following, both from an operations standpoint as well as a project standpoint? How do we sense when something could be improved, and what do we need to do to make that improvement happen? So with us today is the wonderful and amazing Kirsten Gallagher. Kirsten, tell us a bit about yourself.
Thank you so much, Jake. I'm Kirsten Gallagher. I am the owner and founder of the Kaizen Ninja, and I have extensive background throughout my career with all things continuous improvement. And I am really excited to hop in today and talk about just that journey that's happening right now with continuous improvement for processes and setting your intention around the implementation and how to support that the most efficiently and in the most effective way, so your teams can actually do what they do best as far as serving your client and your customers.
Wonderful. I have worked with Kirsten for years, brainstorming and ideating on a number of things, and I think our listeners are in for a huge treat today. You have a brilliant mind to help shift the real nuts and bolts of an organization to get the output that we need in order to accomplish the goals that we're looking for. Let's set the stage a little bit here, Kirsten, talking about AI kind of as an accelerator. When I look back at what we've gone through since 2020, I see the COVID-19 pandemic as a focuser, right? It helped us see what was most important in an organization. And a lot of companies went out of business. A lot of campuses really struggled because we uncovered there what was rightly and correctly aligned with the market and what wasn't. So they really helped us focus in on the value that we were delivering. And now I see AI as an accelerator. Now that we've been able to identify what we're focusing on, AI can accelerate us. Talk to me about how you feel that applies in the world of process management and process improvement.
So any process that you have within your ecosystem is going to help transform either your client or their experience from point A to point B. And you're going to move through that system, right? But in order to do that, there's so much waste in the process. And there's so many opportunities to improve. AI is like the number one tool right now to begin to very quickly identify what you can eliminate, what you can reduce, and how you can actually take your process to that next level so you can consistently provide your client, your students, your customers, the parents involved with the best possible experience. From my perspective, the AI landscape gives you the ability to very quickly identify quick wins, things that can help you make your process run faster and more smoothly without as many challenges. So I'm sure we'll talk about that in a lot more detail, but that's really the foundation for it.
Nice. Yeah, when you talk about those stakeholders, the people often forget about the parents, right? And as parents ourselves who are looking now into what colleges and universities our kids are going to be going to, understanding the processes there helps us. It doesn't always translate to helping our kids. And we've seen lots of situations where the parents are filling out the admissions application on behalf of the child. And that ends up the admissions department having a little bit of confusion around who exactly are they admitting into their school. So when you talk about these processes, and the admissions process is one that that most of us are familiar with. But we're also talking about financial aid processes. We're talking about scholarship processes. We're talking about housing and sports and many others. So when you think about processes, not even the best process is going to have variances in the quality of its output, right? So talk to me about how you see AI helping control those variances so that we have a more predictable output at the end.
So actually, the thing that I think about most with regards to variation in processes, what are the unique situations of the individuals who are moving through your process? Okay. So you have the system in place, you have your employees who are supporting that system, and then you have your clients who are moving through it. And when we're thinking about students, you have all different types of students. You have some students who have military needs and necessities. You have some students who are part-time students who are only there for the evening classes or whatever their part-time scenario is. You have student athletes who are there on scholarship. And so each of these students, actually, where I see a lot of variation and a lot of misses is when your process is set up for your average student, but then you have the other types of students who need very special support. And there's one school that I had the pleasure of working with where we began to dive into what is the admission process. And then in the early part of the student's journey with onboarding, what those unique needs are. Well, AI can help you actually begin to identify when you've missed steps in the process with them. It can actually help you flag some of the unique nuances that we weren't able to do previously. We had to set up triggers in the past that were very specific, or we handled it manually. I bet there's people out here who actually have been living in that manual world. As soon as you tag them in your system, that will help you feel supported in that process. So you can step away from more of that manual, processing to something that is supported by AI and automation.
That's an incredible call out there, Kirsten. When we have a process that's going to miss people, then we got to recognize that there's improvement to be made. And you said what you said there about an average student. In my experience, it's surprising how few students actually fit that definition of an average student, right? Because every one of us is going to have these different circumstances. You mentioned military, you mentioned a bunch of different backgrounds where maybe the process that was built doesn't quite capture them. And so sometimes a process doesn't have the desired outcome, right? It has an undesirable outcome for any degree or grade. Um, if we just take that process and apply the AI accelerator to it, we end up doing the wrong thing faster, right? We end up bleeding faster, right? Then that helps no one in the long run. So talk to us about how AI, you mentioned seeing those triggers and these events in the process. How do you see using AI to improve a process and to identify those gaps or those moments of waste?
Yeah, actually, I would say the very first step in doing that is beginning to actually scrub your data. And it is crazy to think about how much data we have access to that we can't manually actually do anything with. And so, from my perspective, if you are so 20 years ago, 15 years ago, uh, almost all data that we wanted needed to be manually collected. And so we had the right subset of data that we needed. Now we have pretty much continuous data all the time. And so it's actually harder to identify which data is relevant and what we can fine tune. And so, from my perspective, uh, dumping data into AI at the moment is one of our biggest opportunities because it can help us identify those initial gaps and help us scrub some of that continuous amount of data. So that way, now we have an actual path to go. And when you have students who are missed, that might actually look like missing data. And that's something that if you're doing it manually, you might not catch. But if you're using AI, you can begin to actually see where we expected to have data and don't have it, or where the data is showing an outlier, but it would be an outlier for a subgroup, not necessarily an individual person. And so that's where now I feel like AI helps us actually break down that data in ways that we can now say, hey, I want to dive into this further and see where the gap is. And then this gives us a direction to actually move forward in a data-driven way rather than maybe a gut intuition. Or I'm sure in the past you may have experienced the situation where there's huge firefights and you have to put out the fires because that parent or that student is calling because they had the miss, right? And so now the goal is to actually identify that more proactively.
Now, when you talk about some of these data points, right? Any AI analysis that can help us rescue or resuscitate or revamp a process, we got to have that data in there beforehand, right? We have to know what data we're capturing. Do you have any recommendations for what sort of data that we should be looking to capture as part of the admissions process that would help us analyze the effectiveness of our admissions?
Well, if you think about that admissions process, you're going to have various stages throughout. So, minimally, you want to capture what the life cycle of the student is throughout that process. So, if you actually think about Element as the tool that you have for the life cycle of your student, one of the magic things is that you no longer have disconnected systems, that you have to actually have them. Like download data from one system, feed it into another system, try to have all that data connect. Instead, with Element, you actually have your student population and all of the supporting people who are related to that all within one system from the time that the student applies all the way through the time that they actually graduate or receive their certificate. So now you have key stages within the entire student life cycle and their journey through the university where you have data across the board for how they're moving through that system. And you can actually use tags and different ways to indicate where they have moved through the system and where they've missed getting supported.
That's beautiful. Yeah, Element 451 can absolutely provide that information. It's great at building those workflows and automating a lot of the outreach and collecting the information there. But information, unless it helps you make a decision, doesn't really justify its collection. And I want to back up and talk a little bit about what you said a moment ago about what data you're collecting can tell you a lot about who you're servicing and how you're helping them, but also what you're not collecting, what you're not seeing. And that itself can tell a story, right? And so when we look at a continuous improvement and how AI can help project managers and campus leaders make better decisions. Talk to us about how AI can help us identify missing data or uncover any blind spots that prevent us from effectually carrying out the goal of the process.
Missing data could look like that individual not moving forward to the next gateway or stop gate, but it could also show where we have incomplete records related to certification process, sending out all of the graduation information, and then actually wrapping up and fulfilling all of the state required data assessments. AI can help you scrub the data and say, look, these are the individuals that do not have the data that is required for meeting this state funded requirement. And then it can also help you identify where in your process you can actually inject that or where the miss was. So that way, moving forward, you can actually design the process to support that effectively. And so I would say that's the next biggest thing with AI is not only identifying the gaps, but then saying, okay, now where in my process can I actually close this gap? And AI can help you evolve and ask you the questions, or you can provide some information about your process where it can actually trigger the right amount of information to tell you where to go to within your own process.
I love that having AI help you identify the gaps in what you know. I'd also like to switch that around and say sometimes our processes are too bloated, right? When you use AI to identify what you're missing in order to accomplish that goal, you can use that same logic, that same approach to say, AI, what am I collecting that's not necessary? What what additional fluff am I adding into my process that I can reduce and simplify my process and make it easier for the student to succeed through my process, at the same time meeting our campus requirements for reporting or for graduation or for admissions and or you name it, right? And so I love the idea here that the AI can help us identify what's missing, but also help us identify what needs to be cut and reduce and simplify our processes so that we are more effective, so we can connect with the student, so we can remove those roadblocks and make it easier for them to move to the next step. Talk to me about how leaders on a campus, not just managers and directors, but process leaders, human leaders, how we can strike a balance between using AI-driven insights and applying human judgment to improving the process.
So I think this is actually the most critical part about AI usage. So across the board, I feel like a lot of the challenge that I hear in just common everyday discussions about AI is, well, what if AI replaces everybody's jobs? What if AI is making it really hard for us to get into the workforce because there's a gap with our technology usage? And I actually think it's the opposite. I think AI will help us solve problems that we could not otherwise solve, but it requires a human interaction. And so this is where the soft skills come into play. This is where the analysis that a human brings comes into play, because you're able to begin to take this massive amount of feedback that AI is able to generate and say, okay, knowing my team, knowing my client, and knowing that there's going to be some nuances in my system, how do I actually take what was given to me and translate that into something that's usable for supporting my employees, supporting my team members, and then also supporting my clients, right? And so from here, I recommend that if you're a process user or a process owner, you use AI as a tool that actually can help you enhance your own process or your team's process, but then use the knowledge that you have for how to actually go through that change management process with them, for how to actually look at the data and say, well, actually, I know that because of some details that I have, this is 80% of the story, but let me make sure that as I am converting it into my implementations, I've accounted for this extra 20% that AI isn't actually seeing in the story. So that's where I actually see that human interaction being so valuable, because running our team is more than just the technology. There's the people aspect, and then there's the aspect that really is that human knowledge of what has happened in that unique scenario that you can't get just through technology.
Exactly. Yeah, AI is a powerful tool, and it's most effective in the hands of people who are familiar with the subject matter. I know of a situation on one of my teams where we had brought in an intern who still wasn't even done with her undergraduate yet, but we brought her in as an analyst, and she was great with AI, but didn't understand the context very well of what we were trying to develop and build. But she worked with guys that were decades in their industry, and with their decades of experience and knowledge and situational awareness of the product we were developing, her skills with AI, and then connecting both of those with the years of documentation that had been put into place, they were able to get done in a day what otherwise would have taken them over a week to accomplish or more, just because we had a perfect mashup there of great AI skills, wonderful subject matter experience, and great documentation. So when we talk about this, we're now hitting into the culture of a team. And I don't see AI replacing as much as it is reducing the marginal cost of expertise, right? You still have to pay that price to get someone who's an expert, whether that's money or that's time or a little bit of both. We got to get that expertise into the playing field somehow, either hiring them outright or outsourcing it to a contractor, but bringing that expertise into the ecosystem. But then to augment that individual's expertise, the marginal cost is approaching zero as we apply AI. But that impacts a lot, of course, the culture of the team. And so when we talk about AI enhancing a cultural implementation. How does that work in real terms, especially where organizations might be a little resistant or hesitant to change?
Well, actually, I think there's some really neat nuances here and options. Okay. When I go into a process, my whole goal is to make improvements to the process, but that involves the team members, right? And the actual hardest part of my role is to juggle the personalities in the room who are supporting the different aspects of the process. Now, I've been doing my job for 20 years. And so I have learned tremendous skills over that time period with how to support the personalities to move through that very quickly. But on your teams, you may have process leaders or cultural leaders who have not had 20 years of exclusive support of different people who are having change forced upon them or integrated into the change management process. So, just a little thing that you could do is use AI to say, hey, I have this unique personality in my event or in my team. How could I actually present this in a way that would empower them, that would give them the ownership within the process? And AI can actually give you tools and tips to do that. That is something that's pretty amazing. It's almost like a coach on your shoulder. If you are working with a variety of different personalities, I highly recommend that you tap into that. And even if you don't use AI's results verbatim, it could give you some more ideas of how to support the other individuals, or it could give you some questions to ask. I like to ask AI, like, what questions would you ask in this scenario? It could give you some questions to ask to help you uncover some of the resistance that you might be seeing or experiencing. And that alone, when someone feels listened to, that alone could help them become an advocate for that change rather than a resistor to that change.
That's wonderful. One thing that I love to talk to my business partners and clients about is what got you here. Let's recognize it for the miracle it is, the great work, the Herculean efforts that the whole team pulled together to accomplish. And let's recognize that for the excellent award-worthy effort that it is. But what got you here won't get you there. What's coming next? And so when we talk about implementing AI in our processes, in our projects, in our changes, how do we help make sure that AI adoption strengthens the collaboration through these changes rather than isolating people behind a tool or behind a system?
So, when we talk about the accelerator at the beginning, this ties back into that actually for me. Within the span of leading a project and process improvement implementation, the all of the planning is technically waste, and all of the follow-up work at the end is technically waste. The actual value that you get from process improvement is when you're making the implementation. And when I say waste, I'm referring to the 8 wastes in lean manufacturing philosophy. And so we can dive into them at a later time, or you can look me up for to learn more about that in particular, because that's my area of expertise. But when you're thinking about that transformation that's happening, it's the implementation piece that is so critical. And so, how do we actually accelerate the transformation of the mindset that's leading up to the implementation so everyone can culturally be on board together? And AI actually has ways that you can streamline all of that before work and all of that after work. It can literally spit out project plans for you. It can spit out, if you put different things in AI that are related to the dynamics within your process, it can give you recommendations for where you can improve and how to actually support the team in that direction. So, if your team has been working in this realm for several years and they're struggling to identify where to move forward, you can use AI to help support you. And your team has now kind of one step ahead of where they would be otherwise, with beginning to say, okay, if we utilize this idea, how do we come together to make it work? And I kind of think that if you use it effectively in that way, you can use it as a team building tool and as a guidance tool rather than something that pulls you apart. So that's what I would recommend is think about the beginning or like the early stages of your process improvement and the back end stages of that sustainability, and how to use AI to actually support your team in that process of getting to the phase where you can implement effectively. And when you're implementing, your goal is to actually streamline that process and solve the problems that you've been experiencing. And so that alone is going to help your team come together as long as it's solving a true problem. And I think a lot of times when teams don't they're not open or individuals aren't open to that change management, it's because they don't see the value and they're not able to understand how it's going to make their life better. So in that case, identify how you can pilot it rather than go full-blown implementation, and test out whether or not that solution is effective. And if there's things that you find don't align with what you thought were going to be effective, tweak it a little bit. And that will actually alleviate some of the stress for your team and help them come together in that process.
I recently attended this phenomenal AI conference put on by my department. We had a great leader coming from Microsoft who's actually helped design a lot of the operations and marketing and application for ChatGPT and Copilot. And there were four things he said everybody needs to learn. One is to be insatiably curious, ask questions. And when we get into the process definition and unpacking why are we here today, you got to have that curiosity. Second is he said, learn to be adaptable, right? Because things change. Our systems change. The economy changes. Our market changes. We have to be adaptable to these changes. Otherwise, we become irrelevant. Number three is he said, develop your own independent subject matter expertise, right? Knowing how to apply AI, knowing really where AI is going to hallucinate, because, hey, that's a feature, not a bug. AI is going to hallucinate. So having your own independent expertise to check the answers that you're getting out of AI is going to help drive the effectiveness of your AI application. And fourth and final, he said, think in systems, think in processes. Because when we think this way, we're not just talking about a step to be taken. We're not just talking about an office to be staffed. We're talking about what does the whole admissions process look like? And then what does that admissions process feed into at a campus level? What do these processes feed into from the student experience and the student life beyond graduation? And so think in these systems, and having these four concepts in mind is going to be what drives the next economy. And having that human in the loop, as we've heard, is going to be effective when we know how to ask good questions, we know how to adapt to the knowledge that we gain, we develop our own independent subject matter expertise to validate and confirm what we're getting, and we think in systems. Because then we're going to then turn to AI, and we're going to have an AI bot that helps us do analysis, and then we're going to have an AI partner that helps us do regressions, and then we're going to have another AI bot that helps us build a little bit of code. We're going to have another AI bot that helps us coach ourselves or others. And so being able to manage this team of bots and partners is going to really enable each of us to become more than any single human worker has been in our parents' generation or prior. So this is a phenomenal, exciting time to be a part of. Kirsten, I'd love to get more about the 8 ways of waste. Perhaps if you have any marketing material we can put in the show notes with the Kaizen Ninja, I think that would be great, and we can point people towards you. But any final parting thoughts?
Yes, I would say if you're intimidated by AI at all, the thing that I actually use the most when I'm interacting with AI is to say, literally ask, what do you need to know from me in order to help me solve this problem? Because I think that most people don't actually know what they actually need or what to spit into AI to give results that are even worth validating. And so that is the thing that I recommend that you do is you say, hey, this is my scenario, give that little background that you have. And then you say, AI, tell me or prompt me with questions so that I can tell you the details that you need to actually give me the solution. And so that's where I recommend you start. And I really encourage you to just try it with a simple little thing that you notice you are struggling with on a regular basis. What is one thing that crosses your path what's one customer that you're supporting or one problem that you experience during a handoff, during an interaction that you can just say, hey, I'm going to start with trying this out using AI and see what my solution is, and then go from there. So try just in a small scale, small risk, and see how it can support you.
I don't think that can be overstated, Kirsten. And for our listeners, if when you're on campus and you're owning these processes or seeing these processes, you may think that, you know what, we're not in a position where we want to change our systems, right? We have the CRM we need, we have the SIS we need, we have the things that we need, but we're still not quite accomplishing what we expect to accomplish. Reach out to Kirsten Gallagher at Kaizen Ninja, and she can help you map out the processes and how these systems can interconnect so that you can refine these steps and finally unleash the potential that your teams and your systems have. So thank you everyone for listening in. Kirsten, it was wonderful as always to have you with us.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
The Higher Ed Pulse is part of the Enrollify podcast network. If you like this podcast, chances are you'll like other Enrollify shows too. Our podcast network is growing by the month, and we've got a plethora of marketing, enrollment, and higher ed technology shows that are jam-packed with stories, ideas, and frameworks, all designed to empower you to be a better higher ed professional. Our show helps higher ed marketers and admission pros find their next big idea and features a selection of the industry's best as your hosts. Learn from Brian Gross, Eddie Francis, Jenny Lee Fowler, and so many of your favorite leaders in higher ed. Enrollify is made possible by Element 451, the next generation AI student engagement platform, helping institutions create meaningful and personalized interactions with students. Learn more at element451.com.